Hello, everyone. As you see, I'm not actually David Katz. I am Richmond Kitty and I work with David. He is on a well-deserved vacation. So I'm just going to, as we usually do with webinars, wait a couple minutes to see if more people come in. But I might just start doing some of the normal kickoff stuff. If you have any tech issues, personally, my computer has been very annoying today. Please, you can chat me directly as David or just put it in the chat and we will try and troubleshoot. So as you know, you're at the 5th webinar out of 8. Today we're talking about construction administration. And I'm joined today by 2 of our consultants who you might have already met in various webinars or office hours, Melissa Brashan and Pamela Westby. Pamela has been a director at public libraries across Wisconsin and Minnesota for 30 plus years. She's currently the head of the Detroit Lake Public Library in northern Minnesota. And Michelle is currently the interim director at Central Minnesota Libraries Exchange, CMLE, which provides services to academic, school, public, and special libraries across 12 of the counties in Minnesota. And they both have hands-on experience with construction projects, both as library administrators and consultants. I know they're going to have some good stories and tips to share with you today. So logistics, I talked about if there's tech issues, put it in the chat. Also feel free to put in your questions in the chat and I'll either bring them up, as during the webinar as it seems right, or I might just hold it till the end. And as usual, you will get an email after the webinar that's going to have a link to the recording, the slides, and a survey link about what you thought of today's webinar. And I think other things that Melissa and Pamela are going to talk about, we'll send you links and or attachments with those too. So here's a list of what we've already done. I don't really want to read you this whole thing, but we've talked about remodels, needs assessments, different fundings, the architects, contractors, and bidding. So kind of getting, once you have your money, getting actually started. We're talking today about construction administration. So kind of what is your role during construction, what you need to keep your eye on. And then after this, moving kind of chronologically through a project, moving and reopening, and then a couple of case studies so you can see how this has worked on the ground. And our agenda today, Melissa and Pamela are going to split up talking about these topics. So refresher on what you've already talked about, I think, construction phases, and then meet the major players in this, subcontractors, construction documents, community relations during construction, unexpected developments, and change orders. It's always going to come up. And then finally, the home stretch, project closeout, and then some other things you might want to know. So I'm going to hand it over to Pamela.
Hello, I'm really happy to be here today and to talk about the construction phases. We're going to touch briefly on this because we did talk about it at the last webinar, but there have been both interest and some confusion about these phases. So I'd like to kind of go through these a little bit real quickly. And we call these construction design phases and milestones. The first one is pre-design and programming phase. And during this phase, stakeholders discuss the vision and the outcomes for the project related to design only by identifying high-level concepts and recognizing guiding principles. So an example of that would be maybe you want your library to be a destination. For visitors from near and far, the library would be the heart of the city, fostering experiences of community engagement, collaboration, openness, vitality, and creativity. So if that's one of your goals or your guiding principles, you're going to think about your building differently and plan your design differently. The second one, schematic designs, involves visuals and sketches site plans and floor plans, the building elevations. So this is the exciting part that oftentimes goes into a brochure to get people excited and get donors excited about what could be. At the schematic design, we also begin to take shape with critical elements incorporated, such as maybe a structural or mechanical engineer would get involved, plumbing and heating, so we can get some of those walls and ventilation involved and HVAC, so we can just make those decisions. The design development is a detailed plan, and that involves the structural engineer. And this stage allows for more accurate cost estimates. So then we can start talking to our government entities and our donors. During this phase, the owner also selects finishes, materials, fixtures, carpentry, and cabinetry. So that's also a very exciting time. Construction documents phase provides the specifications. So this is your spec order. It's a hefty document that serves as the building map and the floor plan instructions for subcontractors in very great detail. The fifth stage would be the building permits, and that would be done to make sure that the building meets the standards and the building codes, both locally and state and federally. And then we're looking at the bidding negotiations. We want to make sure our contractors have acquired qualified subcontractors and the correct materials. We're looking at commercial and public construction projects that are going to create that bidding process. And this is the entry point for your general contractor on the project. And we'll talk more about who the general contractor is and what they do. This process begins with the owner and the architect sharing, construction projects, and the process begins, and we're ready to go with bid documents. The seventh one is the construction administration, and this is a method of tracking activities to ensure that the descriptions, the pricing, and more are all in line, are documented, and that we can keep track of those easily and accurately. All right, next slide. So let's talk about the major players. And this is really applies to maybe perhaps a larger project where we're involving a general contractor. And their role is responsible for delivering the project as the architect has designed. The construction manager coordinates and manages the risks involved in the actual construction as it's happening. Both the general contractor and the construction manager are contracted by the owner or the owner representative. And I'll just give you an example. In the last construction project I was involved in, the owner was the city, and the owner representative was a library staff member who was involved. And I want to talk just a little bit more about that and say that weekly meetings as what we call the owner, architect, and contractor meetings were very helpful as the construction was happening. Subcontractors, we're going to talk about that in the next few slides. And so we can go to the next slide. So there are many, many different subcontractors. You can think really from the ground up, and you don't always think about the site preparation, elevations, soil borings, site preparation and landscaping. If it's a major project, concrete foundations and footings. In even a renovation may require additional concrete and footing design to ensure that the the renovations can handle the weight and the use, the new use of the building. Then we get into the structural and framing pieces, roofing, shingles, siding, sheet metal work. All of these may be subcontractors. So we're really looking at bigger projects here. If you're just doing, say, you know, a repair to the roof, you may not have all of these subcontractors involved, but you may, depending on the complexity of the project. So the last on this slide is plumbing, HVAC, ventilation, air, and conditioning. And so that involves, just like it's stated, you have all different access points for your HVAC. So every room is involved. And plumbing, that's, you know, your toilets, sinks, if you have a washing machine for, say, children's toys or what have you, dishwasher, for your staff, lounge, different things that you don't always think about. So we can go on to the next slide. And electrical and telecommunications really are two different subcontractors, but we lump them together because they are often tied together. The access points are often together. So we're going to do internet, phones, security cameras, intercom. Intercom is being more popular for safety and security reasons, for announcements of programming. So don't forget to add that when you're doing a remodel, because that's really becomes helpful. The next group is glass windows and doors, elevators and automatic doors. These are really important pieces, and they're very expensive pieces that a lot of thought needs to go into these. And you also want to have a very qualified subcontractor, because it will affect your ongoing costs. Carpentry, drywall, painting, self-evident here, but this it also involves cabinetry and trim, wall trim and so forth. And then ceiling, floor finishes, that could be carpet, tile, many different options out there now for ceiling, wall, and floor. So don't be afraid to take a look at what's green, what's sustainable, and what's easy to keep up. And then if you're looking for book drops and automated materials handling systems, you really want experts involved in this, because I know there have been incidents where a book drop was, the opening was placed at 5 feet when that's not accessible. So make sure that you have qualified subcontractors for that one. Next slide. And now I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Yeah, I want to talk about some construction documents, and a lot of this was covered in webinar 4, which is where you can go back to and review. But I want to highlight the idea of clear communication is vital at every step along the way, and clarity in everything in these construction documents. And I don't know if it's been covered, but you want to make sure that obviously you keep track of all this and keep this in files, either through digitally or in paper, to keep this all together. Sometimes, and again, in webinar 4, we talked about the written bids. Sometimes they're required, sometimes not, depending on how the value of the particular project. You want to check credentials of who's making bids on this. Be sure you get some sort of a resume of references and go back and check that. And then, of course, review it through your building committee. Again, clarity and communication is the top and the most important thing of moving forward. Next slide, your architect will provide your drawings, your specification, and your timeline. Depending on the contract at that time, they may require a third payment down. As you move forward, you'll be able to look at what that is and how much that would be, and be able to know that upfront you'll have that payment. Contractors very often that are awarded the bid will hire and supervise your subcontractors. So if you're doing a big project, the idea of subcontractors fall under that contractor bailiwick. They call in the people that are doing the tiling. They call in the data people. They call in the wireless people. They call in all of the different pieces that the contractor would find necessary. So those subcontractors would be all taken care of under that contractor heading. Now I want to talk about community relations during construction. And obviously, communication with staff and board is absolutely necessary all the time. And then it's not like this is going to be any surprise. From beginning to end, very often on these major construction projects, you're talking years here. Perhaps on the smaller ones, it's not so much that, but on the big ones, it is. And I encourage you to make a big happening out of it. Contact all your media people, get your press there, get your TV cameras there. I'll give you an example. When we built a library in Chanhassen, Minnesota, it was a 36,000 square foot building in front of City Hall, and the community had waited for that library probably 15 years. So when it was time for groundbreaking, we had friends of the library there. They put out a tent, a big tent. They hired a group of young people that were drummers. They were just wonderful. And then we had speeches. We had speeches from the mayor. We had speeches from the county commissioner. We had speeches from the architect. We had speeches from the library director up there under this tent. And it was a big deal. Of course, there were refreshments. On the other side of it, sometimes it's just groundbreaking. Sometimes it's just showing up at a site, having everyone in their construction helmets to sit on with a scoop, and it's real simple. But be sure that you contact everyone, your media, to make this a happening. It is a happening. The community's waited for a long time. Document progress, take pictures and share those pictures along the way. Obviously, the press is going to take pictures, get your staff to take pictures, get your friends to take pictures, start a notebook, and start that happening at the very beginning. And the very beginning is at groundbreaking. As you're going through the construction period, update your community certainly periodically as they're going to be seeing it, but they also want to know from you what's happening, where are we at. And in my construction projects, I often gave talking points to the staff and to the board. Usually I would update them once a week. Every Friday, there was a director update on what was happening, where we're at, was there any problems along the way that they needed to know about, because the community knows what's going on with that. But I encourage you to make this a community relations project and make it a big deal for your community, because it is. It truly is. Okay, we'll go on to looking at managing challenges. Now, in Minnesota and in Idaho, I'm sure some of those challenges can be weather. In this day and age, I do have to say there's material delays. There's material delays of shelving, steel. It happens, and you just have to be able to be prepared for that. You just have to take a deep breath and wait for it to come. We're hoping the contractor and the architects are on top of that, and your articles are ordered in a timely fashion, but there are delays. It's just the way it is in our world today. Budget overruns. There is going to be budget overruns. That's why you put in a specification where you're looking at, when you're doing your construction documents, that you're putting a certain amount, it'd be 3, 5, 10%, whatever you decide to do with that, in case there's budget overruns or if there's any kind of contractor errors that come into place. For example, I'll give you a materials display or a budget overrun. When we built Chanhassen's, the property that was being built on was formerly a gas station. all of that dirt, we did a lot of dirt testing that happened with that. That dirt had to be dug out. It was a major budget overrun for the city, not for the library, so to speak, but it was one of those things that you didn't anticipate, and there it is. So the idea of a budget overrun. The other thing when you're managing challenges, the next slide, please, we need to communicate. Again, if you're the owner representative is in the library or whoever it is, attend those construction meetings, take notes. Usually there is someone there in the construction meeting that is taking formal notes, but make sure that you take notes if there's anything you don't understand or anything you need to know later. If a change is needed and a change order required, everyone needs to be part of that discussion for the change orders. And it needs to be written. You need to gain agreement from all parties resolved. I wanted to give you a couple examples of change orders that we ran into when we were building several of my libraries I've done. One of them was, if you've been a library director for any amount of time, you might have preconceived ideas about what a building should be. And with mine, personally, I believe our library buildings are centers of hospitality within a community. Our community comes in, we're hospitable, we put meeting rooms, we want them to come in. And when we were building one of the libraries in the meeting room kitchen, because we are communities, libraries are communities, are looking at community organization. We didn't have a gooseneck faucet on there to make coffee. Change order. That was really simple. That was a really simple thing. A couple other change orders that happened had to do with cord management. That's another bugaboo with me personally, is to get this cord management, and the idea of getting cord management under your tables. And there were change orders to have a track that would be put under your table. Again, everyone agreed. They saw the need for a change order. Several of our libraries were built with senior apartments over them. They were part of a community-wide effort to get seniors more senior housing within Waconia and Norwich, Young America. And so above the library in the city hall were library apartments. Not library apartments, senior apartments. And the seniors could come down into the library when the library was open without going out the door and coming around. So some of that had to be taken care of, and that became change orders, that the elevator was put in on the inside of the building so that the seniors in apartments above could come down. And that was a major change order. But because a developer was involved in that, we were able to make that happen. Another thing that happened in one of our buildings, the subcontractor put in carpeting tiles that started coming up. And when people would walk on the carpeting tiles, it became dangerous. So we had a meeting, again, back to communicate, showed examples, gained agreement, and we were able to resolve those issues. But those are just some of the little, the first building I built, we forgot a doorbell at the back door. And that was a huge, people have to be able to enter the building. So, as you go along, you're thinking of these things and communicating and working it out, and in the end, it all works out. So those challenges are taken care of. You usually have people, very often in some instances, our friends stepped up with extra money. Sometimes the city stepped up, and sometimes it came from contingency. It all depended on what the issue was. Okay.
Hey, so hopefully we've given you kind of an overview of the activities that happen during construction, and certainly there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end here. But as we're getting into the home stretch and the project closeout, everyone's anxious to get back in and wondering when they can get back in. But a key way to resolve issues is to have an accurate punch list. And really, one tip from the field, I would say, start creating that during the job, so that you or whoever is in charge of that, and we'll talk about that in a minute too, about what that all entails and the expectations. So as far as who creates the punch list, that would be a collaborative process. So I talked earlier about the owner, the project, or the construction manager and the architect, and together creating that punch list and creating a reasonable inspection, a responsible inspection of the completed work. And then that would include both the task and the location, and a priority. Is it low, medium, high? So examples might be a low priority might just be there's a stack of garbage, garbage, as it said, in the corner. But then a high one might be there's a leak, or there isn't a faucet on the sink. Those might be more, or that a faucet might be medium because maybe the part hasn't come. So making sure that all of those things are on the list, and then the date of the inspection, and then the date of completion, or any kind of notation about that it's been ordered and expected date of completion. So as the project comes to the finishing point, it's important to have an eye on the details. So don't be afraid to get extra fussy, because this is your time to get those corrections done. And our second bullet here talks about the amount of money that should be held until completion. So a standard might be 5 to 10%. That's a big variable. So you'll want to work with your government, your city, county, whoever you're working with, and your contractors to come to that agreement. So creating that punch list, like I said, is an owner and project representative responsible for inspecting the work. So the general contractor is then responsible for examining everything on the punch list and creating those details, assigning the tasks to others to complete that. The architects provides a certificate of completion, meaning that all of the jobs are done and everything is ready to go. There's nothing left. But we're going to talk later about the intermittent completion. There's usually a final payments when it's all completed, and then we notify the community and celebrate, just like Melissa was describing the ribbon cutting for beginning the project. So we can go to the next slide. And then in webinar 6, we're going to talk about moving, reopening, and options for interim service. And we'll go to the next slide. And then here are some other terms that you may encounter. So the owner's representative is the person who has been legally assigned to participate in the inspection and decision-making. So in the case of a public library, you may assign that to the director or someone on staff who would represent the project, or you may commission that out to someone else. The project representative is the person who is like the construction manager, and Then I want to talk about the certificate of occupancy. So here we have a situation where most everything is ready and we can safely enter the library, we can conduct business, but there are a few things that haven't been completed. We have a broken chair, so we take the chair out. We have maybe a scuffed up wall that needs to be repaired. Things that allow us to continue on, but these have to be tracked. I can tell you from experience that once that the contractors leave, it's very difficult to get people back. So you want to make sure you hang on to that retainage, which is the last item on the last bullet point here. And make sure that that is not given out until it's complete. Make sure everything, even the little nitpicky things. One term that is not on here has to do with warranty. And from experience, at least, the substantial completion can take quite some time. So in Eau Claire, we were at the end of our warranty by the time the occupancy was done. So then anything that's not complete or any problems going forward, you need to kick into the old process that you had before, whether it's city staff that assist you with issues or your subcontractors locally. So make sure that you keep an eye on those warranties and that you are holding on to the retainage funds that allow you to ensure that those projects are complete. So here are some resources that helped us explain some of the things today, but you can get a deeper dive into these resources. I would also encourage you to look at the architectural AIA website for additional definitions and ways that you can make sure that your contractors and architects are licensed to do work in Idaho. You don't want to get into that situation either. So they may have some information about preparing lists for completed substantial documents, and architect verifies and amends the list, so on and so forth. So I just hope that we've been helpful for you today and welcome any questions.
I wanted to highlight again that you make an important distinction that you hold on to these documents, particularly if you're doing, well, not particularly for a big construction project or a small one. You hold on to these documents either through your city, your county, if they own the building, or you hold on to them. Very often, if you have someone come back in to do any changes, people want to look at the blueprints again or whatever's happening. So as you go along, make sure that you do notebooks or whatever it is. At some point, if you can digitize it, that's fine also, but make sure that those documents are kept and for a long, long time. How about questions?
We had some submitted ahead of time, and I can just kind of run down those, and you can both chime in with your answers. So the first one we had was, what are your recommendations about temporary solutions for materials pickup while a renovation has your building out of commission?
Yeah, I'll start that and talk a little bit. We will be covering that next in March 7th, talking for interim service, but just wanted to give you some examples of what I know has happened in the past. Libraries that have had to close and staff was not allowed in the building. If there was a branch system, very often the staff would we would reassign staff to a second branch. If there was a small office in City Hall, staff could person that office with any reserves or a small collection of children's material or homework helper material. That happens. I've seen grocery stores used where staff go in at various times during a particular time to have reserve books come up. If staff can stay in the building at all, come in for like an hour a day and handle the delivery, that's one thing. I've also seen it out of a bookmobile. If a branch has to be closed and someone has a bookmobile that can be measured, or a empty storefront in town. Sometimes someone's welcoming enough, and so since the community knows what's going on, understand that. So that's a few of the things, and again, we will cover it more, but just some examples of where you can use it, what you can use for interim services.
Yeah, I could also add that in Eau Claire, we searched up vacant properties and that we're looking to lease those out, and did a kind of an evaluation of 3 different sites, narrowed it down to 2, and got bids and looked at all of the what it would take to use those spaces, and ended up in what had been a telecommunications office, or a gosh, what is it called? Where you call center, a call center space that had been vacated, and that is where we ended up using that. We had to add additional telecom to that building, and it did work out really well. There was really great parking there. So you may find a lot of like small strip malls where you could move in temporarily, and that allows them to pay their taxes for a while. And then also lockers could be used at a location, and maybe even be able to reuse those lockers once you're back in your building. That would be a way to make sure that people get their holds efficiently. Do you have other questions? Yeah, and one of our consultants, Nick, is also contributing that one library used an abandoned Kmart. So then the new building, until the new building was built and circulation went up because of the location. So yeah, that's great. I would also want to add that some libraries take the opinion that we're not going to make it too fancy. We're not going to make it too comfortable, because then people might want us to just move there indefinitely, right? But I guess I have just the opposite reaction to it. And the reason is I want people to believe that that same great service that they had in the old building, they will get in the new building. So I feel like we may lose a little bit of trust if we have to be out of our building for a year, 2 years, whatever it is. I want them to know that that same great customer service, friendliness, and convenience will still be there for them. So.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other questions?
Go with one of the other pre-submitted ones.
Yep.
is about when things go wrong, basically, or how to kind of cover yourself. Do you need to make any kind of special insurance provisions for cost overruns incurred by a bad season and delayed start to construction?
Oh boy, I guess I would talk to the contractor to see how they've done business in the past. I don't think that would be a architect question, but maybe you have more insight, Melissa.
I talked with my architect that I work with on buildings, and he said that he had never heard of this in all of his years of building libraries. He said typically cost problems are widely known before it happens. We know what's going to happen, and those come through change orders. Sometimes if there's weather delays, and we had certainly in Minnesota weather delays on buildings, and but people aren't being paid, so it's not like that we need insurance to cover someone that's being paid because no one can do the work. So at least, unless Nick has another, knows anything different, at least that's what his experience had been, that he'd never known about any insurance coverages on those changes. Yeah.
All right, not seeing anything from Nick, so.
Good. Okay.
And Nick, you can feel free to chime in verbally too if you want to.
Okay.
But I'll go on to the next one that was pre-submitted. And I think we sort of touched this, but it's sort of going deeper about, has anyone ever hired a professional photographer to document the project process? Or is that overkill?
I'll give you a couple examples, and I started it when we were talking about the groundbreaking. We had staff and we put them in charge of taking pictures. It was not professional photography, so that's one thing. But they were taking pictures and did notebooks the whole time. So there were, whenever you were in a branch, on the new branch, there was pictures of that, and we provided pictures to the board and as we went along. The professional photographers happened, for us anyway, when the building was finished. The architect brought them in to show off the building. So very often when you went to visit the architect, the next time you happened to be around, you'd see pictures of your library on the wall because those were the professional ones. Now, maybe Pamela has a different one, but that's how we did it with the photos.
Yeah, I would just add that in Eau Claire, we had a TV station approach us about documenting the progress. And as a result, the contractors really took it upon themselves to have the construction cam set up, or the drone set up, so you could watch in real time as things were being constructed. So there was a third floor that was being built on top, so you could actually watch the work being done, which was very exciting. And then also, you know, they just went above and beyond. They would share weekly video updates and also documents about what they had done. So that was very useful when I was reporting out to my city council, to library board, and actually, you know, Facebook, just many different ways you can use those so that the community feels like they're a part of what's happening. And I think that's an important thing too, is sometimes things will look like weird things are happening, right? So digging in for geothermal, for instance, why are they digging? So being able to explain that through social media or other venues, newspapers and television, is a good way to keep people in the loop and get ahead of the naysayers that might come about if it looks a little odd to someone from the outside. Be sure to document the before and after, you know, not only for posterity, but also for closing the loop with stakeholders and for talking about the impact of the project and resources that it's used. So, you know, digging up the ground for geothermal. Well, why are we doing that? Because we're going to, you know, do this for sustainability purposes, and and so forth. And if possible, consider the spaces that will be most likely to see a big change. So is it your front door? Is it your children's area? So what did it look like before? Was it dark and dingy and now it's open and sun-filled? Make sure you take those shots before and after. So yeah, and I would say use a professional, although oftentimes our smartphone cams take awesome pictures too. So maybe a combination.
Sure. I've also been in communities that utilize cable TV. Some communities do more than others. And I know there was ongoing updates that this particular library did. The library director would go in, she would bring in various guest speakers like the architect, like the children's librarian, different things, and do talking and have some visuals. Perhaps video, perhaps just still cameras like slides like we use, and to update the community that way. But, you know, some communities use cable TV a lot and some not at all, so.
I like Michelle's comment too in the chat about using videos and probably photos too as a way to document the process as it's going along. Well, so you can come back to like the contractor and say, this is supposed to be this way. But as a documentation project rather than sort of a community relations project. And so the last question we had submitted is a very specific one. The question is, what is cantilevering? But I think it's a good example of when you're doing a project like this, how you might just hear these terms flying by you, very specific terms that are very important to the process and to what will be your library. And yeah, just that might happen and that you may not ask in the moment what it is, but you should find out. So what is cantilevering?
Yeah. Okay. I did consult with my architectural friend. And the explanation I got was that it's related to a building structure, a long span of building or a bridge or skyway. It's supported without using columns. And so there's an example of the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. And I can send you the link to that in the chat here. But it's called the Endless Bridge. So that would be my answer to that. And Melissa, do you have anything to add?
I do. I was thinking about this and what libraries might have it. I know that there's a portion of the teen room at the downtown central Minneapolis Public Library, that the teen room is out kind of the space. Also, they're building a brand new downtown library in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I pulled up pictures of that. They just have the schematic design online, and those, I know there's lots of libraries that have it, but this is a huge 115,000 square foot building that looks like there's several rooms that are out that way. So I do think it happens a little bit. It's to give libraries more space. Obviously, you need someone that knows how to do this very well with it. But there are examples all out there of like, Missoula also. Missoula in Montana, their downtown public library has increased space, and that won the Library of the Year award in 2022 for MSR, which is a local architect here in the Twin Cities. So those are just a few examples. I'm sure there's lots more. Okay. How about other questions?
Nick, do you have any stories you want to share or anything that from the presentation that you want to add to?
Um, one
All of
thing-
these oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, the other thing that I guess we didn't, we talked about public relations, but I also think it's really important to talk about the relationships as that core group, those major players, because you are a major player too. And so really getting to know the major players, and I consider everyone that I worked with as a friend, right? So we keep in touch, and I just think that's really another piece of my life. And it will be for you too, I'm sure, whatever project you're working on. I do see another question in the chat. Substantial completion. So we covered that in one of the earlier slides, but I'll maybe define it. So substantial completion would mean that it's safe to be in the building, and that you can go ahead and move things in, get started, but there's still some things that need to be done that are not safety concerns. So you can open your doors, you can do business, but there's a scuff on the wall, there's a door that's not installed, something that isn't critical to safety and use of the building. Does that make sense, Megan? Okay, great, thank you.
I want to build on what Pamela said, the idea of having relationships and being friends with these people. We had an incident with back to the Chanhassen Library where they were delivering our shelving, and the building was ready for the shelvers to come in and put our shelving up. And the shelving came from a vendor that I had longstanding relationships with and had known him for years. And as the truck is backing up, the staff and I are standing outside watching this shelving truck back up. They backed into the garage and broke the bricks above it, and we kept saying, stop, but the truck was a ways and didn't hear us. But here's the thing. I knew that person, because I had a relationship with him, would take care of it. And within a month, that was taken care of. The insurance was covered, it was taken care of. So there's, kind of lessons learned. There's making sure you're on good standing with a lot of these people, because they're your friends for a long time, and you hang around with them for a long time. I see, is there another question here? Well,
There's a follow-up.
Substantial.
Yeah, and I think you just brought up a really good topic as far as furniture and shelving, because as Melissa mentioned earlier, availability is really an issue for the shelving and furniture. So yeah, if you don't have your shelves in, that's not substantial completion. I understand that. So yeah, even though the building might be safe to use, you're not able to operate. So yeah, I would say you don't have a way to operate in the way that you would. Now, that being said, maybe there are other shelving options, depending on how big your project is and so forth. I'll put that disclaimer out there, but are there other ways that you can display is it just a few shelves, or is it just a few items? But if it's your entire stock of shelving, yeah, you're in a situation. So that would be another thing, as an alert, to make sure that you get together with that interior designer and get that shelving and furniture on order in plenty of time.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
The cost of shelving has risen by about 300% over the last couple years. We just priced out a library here in Minnesota, and we found that out. So it's a big deal, and you need to get it right with that.
This has really been fun, and thank you so much for your questions ahead of time and during the webinar. This really this interaction makes it feel like we're engaging more, and we sure appreciate that.
Thank you.